Yuma, hello everybody. Welcome to tonight's lecture. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're on the unceded lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, and I pay my respects to the elders past and present. For those who don't know me, my name's Professor Kylie Message-Jones. I'm the Director of the Humanities Research Centre here at the Australian National University. The Humanities Research Centre has been around for 50 years. In fact, this year we're celebrating our 50th anniversary, so there'll be a lot of exciting events forthcoming throughout the year, and we'd like to invite you to all of those, and they'll be on our website. Every year the Humanities Research Centre has an annual theme, and it has done so for coming up to 50 years. This year our theme is Time and Place, Everywhen. And each year we invite a number of very special distinguished visiting fellows from across the country and internationally to come to the HRC and to present their research into the annual theme. So we're very lucky this year that in fact we've got two Centre for Classical Studies HRC collaborative fellows here. So just for your advance notice, there will be another CCS HRC lecture later in the year. But tonight we're really delighted to have Dr. Lucy Jackson, whose work really does talk quite closely to our annual theme of time and place. We will be recording tonight's lecture, just to let you know. We're not intending to record the questions, however. Finally, I would really like to thank my Centre for Classical Studies colleagues who have made this collaborative visiting fellow and distinguished lecture program a delight to work with, a delight to work on. And I'd also really like to thank the Classics Endowment Fund, because the donations that are distributed as a result of that pay for events like this. So it's a really important facilitator for us to do great work. And the last person I'd like to thank is Melinda Takamura, who does all of our administration and the technical work for these events, and that's quite significant. So thanks to Melinda. But that's it from me. I think I'd like to welcome Tatiana, who will now introduce our speaker.
Thank you so much, Kylie. It's my very great pleasure to introduce Dr. Lucy Jackson and her work this evening on behalf of the ANU Centre for Classical Studies. Lucy, as we've just heard from Kylie, is the inaugural HRC CCS Fellow. She's coming to us all the way from Durham University, and I don't think we could have asked for a better sort of first experience. Usually these distinguished lectures are delivered by people who fly in, fly out, but we've really been lucky enough to have Lucy among us and to collaborate with her for a number of weeks already. And it's been really fantastic to have her here, both as a scholar and as a person. Lucy has been able to contribute to the academic culture, both of the HRC and of the CCS in the time that she's been here, and that's really no mean feat, as well as having to wrangle two small children halfway across the world. So well done, Lucy. We've had the pleasure already of hearing some of her work in the HRC Morning Tea series, and the Centre for Classical Studies staff have been really lucky to be able to talk in depth with Lucy about her research projects, both past and forthcoming. So no spoilers, but keep an eye out for all the interesting things that are yet to come. All of this to say that I think I speak for all of us here at the Centre for Classical Studies, that having Lucy has been really wonderful for us, and we hope that it's been useful for her too. And we, on the flip side of what Kylie was just saying, we're really grateful to the HRC for this collaboration and for enabling the HRC CCS Fellowship to exist. So Lucy is a specialist of ancient Greek drama. Her 2019 monograph, The Chorus of Drama in the 4th Century BCE, Presence and Representation, was published by Oxford University Press, and not only casts light on the role of the chorus in a way that no one had done before, but it actually does more than that, in that it brings loads of insights on the history of Greek drama and on ancient Greek theatrical practice and performance. And Lucy's in fact worked a lot on performance, both ancient and modern, and she's published widely on the reception of Greek drama in the early modern period, as well as in the 20th and 21st centuries. And we're seeing lots of the strands of those kind of really broad research interests come together tonight in the paper that Lucy will give, which is entitled Unsettling Oedipus, Psychoanalysis and the Ancient Greek Chorus. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Lucy Jackson.
I want to begin today by acknowledging the Ngambri and Ngunnawal people, traditional custodians of this land, and of a city that has been home for members of my settler colonial family from the 1970s onwards. I would like to pay my respects to the elders of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, past, present, and emerging, and I also want to extend those respects to any and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. I would also like to reiterate some thanks that we've already heard, but I think it's important, and this is my chance to say it in front of all of you today. I'd like to thank Melinda Takamura for all that she has done to make my time here at ANU possible and profitable. I'd like to thank Kaylin Davenport and my colleagues in the Classics Department, and huge thanks for their support. And I'd like to thank someone who isn't here today, my husband Rory, for looking after the kids so I can actually be physically here with you right now. There is a long history of thinking and theorising about the world using the plays that were written and first performed in ancient Greece 2,500 years ago. From the very beginning, these plays were embroiled in contemporary politics. Not that we should be surprised about that, for theatre is always a thoroughly political act. Who is on stage? What can be said in a public space? Where's the money coming from to make the theatre possible? However, certain philosophers and political theorists in Europe were attracted to the plays of ancient Greece, the tragedies in particular. Sophocles' Antigone and Euripides' Bacchae are perhaps the two most famous of these. And since the early 1900s, the figure of Oedipus has defined how psychiatrists and psychoanalysts have approached the development of the human psyche, thanks to Freud. Others in the field of psychoanalysis have taken up a panoply of mythical figures from the ancient Greek world in trying to understand how and why we act as we do. One element, however, that has been consistently overlooked in these theorizations with tragedy has been the chorus. A group of 12 or 15 performers with a shared fictional identity who spoke, sung, and danced alongside the individual characters. Every single Greek tragedy has a chorus. It is the genre's defining element. Although essential to tragedy, it is far from formulaic or conventional. Each chorus's fictional identity is specific to the play that they are in, and the music the chorus sung and danced to was unique, as far as we can tell, in each and every play. Now, theorists and scholars do look at and use what the chorus says, treating it as a disembodied or single-bodied thing. In this, they cohere with Aristotle's brief description of the chorus in drama, that it should be treated as one of the actors. Or, sometimes, the chorus is thought to represent the general masses, or the collective. This approach has its roots in the aftermath of the French Revolution. The power of crowds became something to suspect, fear, and control for many political theorists and philosophers, and indeed playwrights. In the modern era, it is economics that exerts the greatest influence on our failure to see the chorus in performance. The expense of an additional group of actors, let alone 12 or 15, is rarely deemed worthwhile, and so it is cut. When the budget does allow for a large cast, theatre makers are generally uncertain what to do with them, or they prefer to treat the chorus as a group of individuals with their own character names, roles, and backstories. There is one strand in political thought that will look at the chorus as a representative of a specifically democratic body on stage, a space and mouthpiece for deliberation, restraint, and consensus. However, in this regard, both classicists and political theorists have been guilty of misconstruing both the chorus
and the democratic entanglements of the genre of tragedy. As a growing body of new work has shown, tragedy never wholly belonged to Athens or to democracy, and plays were conceived and staged under various political regimes, autocracy as much as democracy. And when we look at the performance history of Greek tragedy, it is even more clear that democratic values are in no way inherent to the genre, with magnificent productions being produced by fascist regimes in the mid-20th century. In sum, none of the existing approaches within the Academy grants the chorus its complexity or its multitudes. Now, the fact it has been overlooked is in some ways understandable. Certainly when I was picking up my first Greek tragedies to read as a theatre studies student, not as a classicist, I, like so many others, skimmed over the choral parts. A.E. Housman was not far off in his Fragment of a Greek Tragedy, which opens with the following pastiche of choral speech. "O suitably attired in leather boots, head of a traveller, wherefore seeking whom, whence, by what way, how purposed art thou come to this well-nightingaled vicinity?" Or again, a choral ode from that same piece. "In speculation, I would not willingly acquire a name for ill-digested thought, but after pondering much to this conclusion, I at last have come. Life is uncertain. In this truth I have written deep in my reflective midriff on tablets, not of wax, nor with a pen did I inscribe it there, for many reasons. Life, I say, is not a stranger to uncertainty." Now, Housman was mocking translation techniques required of Victorian schoolboys as much as anything here, but I would be lying if I said there aren't choral odes which bear an uncomfortable resemblance to Housman's caricature. The general understanding of what the chorus did was, and still is, that it commented on the action. And who wants to read commentary? Give me the revelations of incest, the dismemberings, the murders with double-edged axes, the battle of words arguing for and against the sacrifice of a young girl, the impassioned defence of a brother's right to a burial. It is the Oedipuses, the Antigones, the Medeas, the Electras, and the Oresteses, their linear journeys from ignorance to knowledge, their catastrophic actions that have and continue to make bold and compelling claims on our attention. Contrarian that I am, I have continued to sit with my dissatisfaction with how to understand the chorus, drawn to focus on it in my research, reading what others have earnestly suggested about its importance, and even writing my own book, banging a drum about how essential the chorus of drama is. I'm still fairly mystified. In reading what others have to say about the function of the chorus, and reading back what I've written myself, I am acutely aware that if we grasp too firmly at the chorus's formal elements, the rhythm and poetic metres used, the words the chorus speaks, its structure, the facts of its religious or political importance in ancient Greek society, it will escape us as if we were trying to grasp water. An interlude for you here. At the still point of the turning world, neither flesh nor fleshless, neither from nor towards, at the still point, there the dance is, but neither arrest nor movement. And do not call it fixity, where past and future are gathered, neither movement from nor towards, neither ascent nor decline. Except for the point, the still point, there would be no dance, and there is only the dance. The chorus of ancient Greek drama was not one single thing, in a very literal sense, in that it is a multi-body and physical presence, commanding a different kind of attention from an audience, something that we all too easily forget when we are reading these plays as text. The tragic chorus is a mode of communication, not bound by logic, encompassing myth, prayer, a privileged connection with the divine, and with embodied cultural memory. It moves easily between these kinds of communication. It speaks, it dances, it sings, it exclaims, it is silent, it moves, it intervenes, it is still. The tragic chorus is both a performance space, the physical dancing floor that summons ideas of public open access, and a conceptual space, if we think of the many ancient writers who used the chorus to think with, thinkers like Plato and Xenophon. These performative and conceptual spaces both enclose and exclude. There are things that are not in the chorus or choral space. And at the same time, the chorus resists closure and finitude. Remember, the chorus always survives at the end of the play. And its choral projections connect it to an ongoing performance culture stretching both backwards and forwards in time. Members of the chorus will also not remain in that chorus, but will disband and reintegrate into other communities. How on earth do we get a handle on something so plural, multitudinous, contradictory, and alien to the existing frameworks of so-called Western philosophy? And I think my problem is how I've been taught, especially within the European legacy of the academy, to see value in literature, in thought, in life. Or perhaps more generously, the perennial difficulty I, and I think others, find in accepting mystery, indeterminacy, shifting definitions, paradox, ambivalence, and the unboundedness of time and experience. This is just one of the reasons why the Humanities Research Centre's theme of everywhen was so appealing, and how glad I am to have learned something of the alternate ways of understanding among Indigenous peoples of this continent. I feel illiterate in these new ways of understanding, but I am in the fortunate position of being employed to learn as well as to teach. What I have learned so far about what the Pintupi people call Chukurpa, the dreaming, offers just one avenue for ongoing discussion and education of those like myself still in the thrall of West European ways of thinking and being. Here then is my starting point. The chorus of drama articulates ways of being that are complementary and antithetical to certainty, definition, to the individual, and to linear narrative or time. The chorus mystifies, and if that sounds negative, then let it be negative in the mode of John Keats's idea of negative capability. What if a tolerance for being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason, may not be the problem, but the answer? It is my hunch that if we have as our starting point a chorus that is mysterious, indeterminate, and impossible to define in traditional terms, we can begin to follow its lead to new ways of thinking and being. We might think chorally. We might live chorally. And like other contemporary political theorists, I do believe the plays of Greek tragedy can serve a concrete political purpose. I suspect the chorus might be a location of and an incitement to generative disorder in personal and political thought and action. Today, I'd like to think through just one frame for understanding choral mystification. And this frame is drawn from psychoanalytic theory, but from a psychoanalyst, Wilfred Bion, who was deeply committed to the practicalities and practical applications of his work. He's also refreshingly pessimistic about his own attempts to create a general theory or to articulate anything unerringly true. While always striving for scientific precision in his own writing, he never ceases to embrace the impossibility of a complete and finished understanding of something. Psychoanalysis, he says, represents only the start of an investigation. It stimulates growth of the domain it investigates. He is credited with some of the most fundamental contributions to the study and practice of psychoanalysis today. I was originally drawn to Bion because of his work with groups. This is where he started, working with groups of soldiers while in charge of the training wing of a military psychiatric hospital in the early 1940s. Following the Second World War, he continued this work with groups. He was interested in observing how groups worked, not how he might treat or cure groups of people simultaneously. He seems to have spent many decades confounding groups who believed they had gathered to receive therapy, and therapy from him, only to find their supposed therapist busy saying little and keenly observing their growing discomfort, frustration, and eventual fury. He seems to have been a bit of a mystic, but, as one quickly sees from his writing, was committed to honing with ever more accuracy and truth an illumination of the human psyche. He immediately appeals as a collaborator for understanding choral mystification. One of the major theories that he developed is that of container and contained. And I'm somewhat artificially cutting this theory off from the rest of his work, and indeed many other theories and practitioners within psychoanalysis in what follows. I am in no way qualified to expound on the entirety of psychoanalysis. And so, as Bion himself might have phrased it, I'm doing the best of a bad job. At this early stage in what is a relatively new project for me, I hope that plucking this theory out of the mass of psychoanalytic thought and showing how it can illuminate our issue with the chorus of drama will encourage others to join me in my wandering. In his articulation of the container and contained process, Bion did not invent a new technique, but a way of viewing something that was already happening. Perhaps a good starting point is understanding the process of container and contained as first occurring in early infancy, perhaps even before this. A baby is unable to understand or tolerate a sensation or thought or feeling, and therefore disowns it, splits it off, and projects it into the mother or primary carer, who is then able to take in this intolerable sensation, thought, or feeling, and transform it into something that the baby can take back in and understand. In a healthy situation, the baby learns over time to contain the discomfort themselves and make the transformation internally. This is an active process rather than a state of being, hence why Bion avoided using containment as a way to describe this process. It is also key in distinguishing Bion's ideas from those of paediatrician and psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott's ideas of holding. The same phenomenon is being observed by both Bion and Winnicott, but in Bion's conception of it, there is activity and work being done on both sides, container and contained. Bion based this theory on his observations from practice, and he gives the following account of his own failure to act as a container, which is useful for understanding what the process is in health. When the patient strove to rid himself of fears of death, which were felt to be too powerful for his personality to contain, he split off his fears and put them in me, the idea apparently being that if they were allowed to repose there long enough, they would undergo modification by my psyche and could then be safely reintrojected. On the occasion I have in mind, the patient had felt that I evacuated them so quickly that the feelings were not modified, but had become more painful. He felt this was my refusal to accept parts of his personality. Consequently, he strove to force them into me with increased desperation and violence. His violence was a reaction to what he felt was my hostile defensiveness. The analytic situation built up in my mind a sense of witnessing an extremely early scene. I felt that the patient had experienced in infancy a mother who dutifully responded to the infant's emotional displays. The dutiful response had in it an element of impatient, I don't know what the matter is with this child. This patient had had to deal with a mother who could not tolerate experiencing such feelings and reacted either by denying them ingress or, alternatively, by becoming a prey to the anxiety which resulted from introjection of the infant's feelings. Now, although initially traced as a process occurring in early infancy, this descriptive, abstract process might occur in any asymmetrical relationship between two parties. In the abstract, then, this process can be defined as this. The container contained addresses how we process lived experience and what occurs psychically when we are unable to do psychological work with that experience. Both parties are responsible for generating material for this process to work. Quoting Thomas Ogden again, the material is thoughts and feelings derived from lived emotional experience, the contained, and on the other, the capacity for dreaming and thinking those thoughts, the container. Here it is important to note Bion's understanding of dreaming and the role of dreaming in this process. He says, Freud says, Aristotle states, that a dream is the way the mind works in sleep. I, that is Bion, says it is the way it works when it is awake. While Freud's ideas of dream work are of mental work that takes unconscious thoughts and through condensing and altering them makes them available to consciousness for thinking, for Bion, dreaming allows conscious lived experience to be altered so that it becomes available to the unconscious for psychological work. For Freud, a society dreams its repressed feelings in myth. For Bion, a society dreams its lived experiences in myth, and in making them mythical, allows the society's unconscious work to be done. The outcome of the container-contained process is learning, and the psychological growth that comes in both parties. Of course, change and growth is something that we often vigorously resist because it is painful. This is indeed what is gestured by the chorus of Aeschylus's Agamemnon when they give that devastating line, "Wisdom comes from suffering," or, as Bion might have translated it, learning from experience, which is what he regarded as the outcome of the container-contained process. Now, Bion was aware of how imperfect the image of a container was. On the one hand, it is a seemingly helpful, intuitive image, but it also misleads in suggesting that a container is rigid in some way, and also passive, as thoughts and feelings of the contained are poured into them. This is not what Bion describes. Rather, what he observed was a dynamic process with choice and challenge on both sides to be met and struggled with throughout. True to paradoxical form, of course, both container and contained can have these rigid boundaries when either one is in some way unable or unwilling to articulate their true thoughts and feelings. Rather menacingly, but appropriately in the context of Greek tragedy, Bion notes that when the relationship is sterile in this way, quote, either the container or the contained must be destroyed. The analytic encounter is then a dance of sorts in search of a link between container and contained. Its failure is as, if not more, common than its success. Now, while the contained must struggle to produce true thoughts and feelings, it is the container that has a yet more challenging role. Bion elsewhere described the ideal state of mind for the container to be one of reverie. The challenge of being in such a state of mind is that one must exist somewhere in between the world of the contained and the world of themselves. Or to put it in another way, they must struggle to reconcile themselves as both dream object and proper object. Thought must occur simultaneously on at least 3 different levels: unconscious dreaming, preconscious reverie, and conscious reflection. Crucial here are all those ways of being that are beyond the senses, beyond what we can hear and see. So tone, atmosphere, emotion. In all that I have learned about Bion's articulation of the containing function, there are many immediate and ready resonances with a kind of multiplicity and fragility of form in the chorus of drama. Particularly appealing is the container's offer of enabling new thought from within a receptive mind, in tune with unconscious and preconscious thought, willing to let go of memory, desire, and experience when necessary. If we understand the chorus in this way, we find ourselves a way to understand the psychological work of the chorus, of choral work. Perhaps by having the containing function exist in not the single body of the analyst, but in the multi-bodied chorus, not the seated figure, but in the dancing, shouting, singing figure of the chorus, the process of container and contained might be magnified and so be made more visible. That's the theory, anyway. Bion would want to see it in practice. And so I will end today with a brief sketch of how we might read the chorus and its work through the lens of container and contained. When Electra and the chorus first meet in Sophocles' play Electra, the stage seems set for an ideal container-contained encounter. She is in pain, grieving the murder of her father, Agamemnon, at the hands of her mother Clytemnestra and her partner Aegisthus. She recounts the story, first on her own and then to the women of the chorus as they come on stage. The chorus immediately take up a quasi-parental position, calling Electra child, teknon, believing her grief and being angry on her behalf. They also subtly flag their position as both inside and outside of the story, a key component to this idea of containing function, saying that they have come to offer Electra comfort, in the Greek paramuthion, a word that can also be understood as next to or alongside the mythos, the story. Electra acknowledges their kindness and their support. They have an existing relationship, one that is trusting and indeed loving. And yet, at first, neither party seems capable of containing work. Electra refuses to take in what the chorus offer her, claiming emphatically that she knows what she is doing and cannot be changed. The chorus highlight her resistance to change almost too neatly from a psychoanalytic perspective by talking about the impossibility of release, of analysis or analysis. She is stuck, unable to grow, speaking of her lack of husband, of children, of honour, all the ways in which growth is externally marked for a woman like her. She is perpetually standing still. She is always going on. Meanwhile, the chorus in what they say seem to constrain rather than contain. They chastise her lack of moderation. They try to minimise her grief by saying, "Not to you alone among mortals, my child, has sorrow been made manifest." And they exhort her to have courage, buck up, and to be hopeful of the return of her brother Orestes and the prospect of vengeance and peace. They are unable to take in whatever thoughts and feelings Electra might wish to split off from herself. So this goes for the first 70 lines or so of their exchange. But then there is a shift, a change in tone. The chorus take themselves out of remonstrating with Electra, and instead they seem to dream the moment of Agamemnon's murder, the cause of Electra's psychic pain. Piteous was the cry at his return, piteous as your father lay there, when the blow of the brazen axe came straight upon him. Cunning was the teacher, passion was the killer. Horribly they brought into being a shape horrible, whether it was a god or a mortal who was the doer. The description of the murder is gappy, dreamlike. Who cried at Agamemnon's return? Who wields the brazen axe, Clytemnestra or Aegisthus? Embodiments of trickery, dolos, and passion, eros, motivate these deeds, but the doer themselves could be divine, could be mortal. The chorus are clearly emotionally connected to this memory, a memory that can be no memory for them because they weren't there. They feel pity, they feel betrayed, resentful of the eros that caused this. In their dreaming thoughts, they also represent something being generated, a terrible deinos shape that is conceived in the translation I would suggest for the Greek verb prophuteo. The moment of Agamemnon's murder is also a moment of creation, of procreation, and the result is something terrible. Not in her very next reply, but in the following reply, Electra seems to have taken in this dream thought, this notion of the murder of Agamemnon as being generative, and taken the thing conceived and born to be her. Dreadful actions were forced on me by dreadful things, and highlighted that it's the same words, deinos and deinos, being used. I know it well. My passion does not escape me. But amid these dreadful things, again that same word, deinos, I shall not hold back from this ruinous action, so long as life holds me. She describes herself as controlled by this terrible, terrible thing. She has taken in this image of something dreadful, something deinos, and allowed it to work on her understanding of herself. Where current scholars note that this dreamy interlude occurs, their interpretation of it is rather weak. It emphasises the chorus's support of Electra, although they've already done that. The description of the murder creates pity for Electra, but there has already been plenty of that. By viewing the shift and the following response from Electra as one where the process of container and contained is active, allows us to see the dynamic role of the chorus. They are in the process of psychological work with Electra, though I'm clearly not saying that this is healthily done or with good results. This is but a brief snippet of how we might view choral work in the plays of Greek tragedy, but I hope it has illustrated how the difficulties and challenges presented to us as readers and audiences of the ancient Greek tragic chorus are the right starting point for interpretation. Second, I hope it shows how Bion's articulation of this process of container-contained is something that can return a sense of dynamism to the choral work in Greek tragedy. Instead of viewing shifts in position or posture or tone as the product of a playwright seeking aesthetic or thematic effects, these shifts might also be read as indicative of the underlying work occurring within the tragedy and within theatre. I want to end by returning to Chakurpa and the importance of dreaming. Dreaming. You hear them talk about it, this sweet thing. Sometimes they call it the dreaming, an approximation for English language speakers. In Arente, they call it Altjere, or in the Western Desert language, Chakurpa, or the Walpiri, Jakurpa. What does this really mean, this state of things that brings tears to Paddy Sims's eyes, seated cross-legged before a canvas, singing quietly, painting the Milky Way story? This thing that women depict and men define in sand drawings, deft fingers moving upon canvases stretched on the bare ground or smudged on a backyard cement slab near the Todd River. Chakurpa, land claims, faraway looks, casually marking this rock and that. Reverence, breaking into song in creek beds, shrugging, walking off. Chakurpa, lightly held, with a gravity so exquisite, so solid, so omnipresent. Chakurpa, perhaps the most misunderstood, most ignored, most beautiful, most mysterious, most exploited, most obliterated phenomenon in this country. Strangely provocative, Chakurpa is seamlessly sewn into the Australian landform, sown as seeds in the mind of a country a long time ago today. What should I attempt in defining it, this all-pervading substance that offers no salvation, no redemption? Without wanting to draw direct equivalences between the dreaming of Indigenous peoples on this continent and the kind of dreaming articulated by Bion, although the author of this quotation has, and the ancient Greek chorus, I think it is an apt rallying cry for us to acknowledge the limitations of Western European ways in how we see the world. When I consider the chorus of Greek tragedy, I stand mystified. It offers no salvation, no redemption, but it might. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lucy. That was so wonderfully provocative and such a great demonstration of the breadth of research that the humanities encompasses. So thank you for that. That's all we've got time for right now, but there are refreshments that are going to be offered outside. We would love it if you could join us. Lucy will be there after she's had a sip of wine. She might also answer people's questions. So thank you again, Lucy, if we can all join me in saying thank you very much.